what I've really learned from, your journey and watching you build Visualize Value is that iteration is the key, not quitting necessarily. So maybe tell me about that process of iteration.
Yeah. So I think you can sort of study it at every different layer, like iteration as it applies to the business model of Visualize Value. That's changed. So it's gone from, one service that we would offer to the only service we offer to a service we have figured out how to put into products that can, span time and space and teach people asynchronously. So I think one of the things that's difficult to grasp, but one of the things that the way you phrase, like, should I quit or should I keep going or should I iterate? There's like stage 0 of something where you need to feel some level of some feedback, some positive feedback, whether that's like your own learning. Like, for example, you have a podcast and it makes it possible for you to have conversations with people that you otherwise wouldn't have conversations with. Like, that in itself is a positive feedback loop that is worth leaning into. I think we're too quick to judge these loops as like, did I make X amount of dollars on this day? And that's obviously not the thing that happens on day 0. Like, Visualize Value was, the publishing of the content beyond the agency clients I had at the beginning. There's like a 3, 4, 5 month lag there before that became a vehicle for new business entirely. Like, I was working off of the networks that I'd built manually by, working in agency environments and just like meeting people out and about. And your like ability to iterate, this is the like exponential function, right? It's like the iterations you are making when you're small and there's only a few eyeballs on your work. It's very hard to understand how much of a difference it's making because the sample size is so incredibly small. And I've talked about this idea before of like the beginning part of it has to be selfish in some way. So if you're doing the podcast is a good example, or if you're the design thing for Visualize Value, if it's making you a better designer, it's just this process that, if you practice for an hour or 2 hours a day and you weren't going to, like 5 years ago, you wouldn't publish that work. The only difference is you're publishing it now. And even if that doesn't position you to build $1 million like leveraged business that's paying you while you sleep, it makes you a better designer. And in the next interview you go to or the next freelance job you pitch, you have a bigger body of work to demonstrate your skill set. So I think it's like having the end result in mind, but also understanding that there's like tiers of iteration that need to happen in between. And the thing you're working on, can it be beneficial to like the work you're doing without scale? Even the podcast example is like, if you do a certain type of work, meeting people one-on-one is, I won't make the comparison to cold calling, but it's network building for somebody who is like at the start of their career or, just starting to build skills. And if you're later into your career, then it's kind of twofold. You're building a network and you're exposing your skill set and the way you think and the way you interact with people at scale. So I think there's like I also talk about my advantage I feel like I had was I was way less, I don't know if this is, I can't quite empathize with somebody growing up at this point in time, because when I started my career, there was no like, TikTok, Instagram, Facebook, like they all like, I think Twitter and Facebook existed, but I had like, 60 friends on Facebook and 2 of them I would speak to once a week. Right. So I would go to work and I would just work for 10, 12 hours a day. I had an amazing mentor who was like, taught me the craft of design, copywriting and strategy and all of those things that are like, undoubted, like there's no doubt that those form the base for this thing that you can iterate on in a new environment. So that's also something to recognize, is either getting into an environment or finding a thing that is so like enrapturing that you just want to like get better at it by any means necessary. You could definitely do that in the physical world and the digital world still. But I think finding this double-edged sword, right? Like the internet exposes you to so many things and that's why it's great, but it's also the downside of the internet, as it exposes you to so many things when the opportunity cost of focusing on the wrong thing, I think is is high or perceived as really high, right? And you just end up, I see this constantly with people who I've spoken to. A few people tried to help them find a thing or their thing. And there's this tendency to do something for a month and then, oh, this new thing's coming out and I'm going to switch to that. And I think there are like underlying skills that transcend all of these, you know, whether it's technologies or trends or industries, where it's like, if you're a great writer, if you're a great interviewer, if you're a great designer, if you're a great illustrator, if you're a great screenwriter, like all of those creative skill sets, those are the things that are not going to be automated, or at least the last to be automated, right? These are the things that are very difficult to write software to replace you.
Right.
So although it feels like the world is passing you by while you're getting better at this stuff, it's more just like noisy trends that you can plug your skill set into when you reach a level of mastery or excellence or whatever you want to call it, where you feel confident to go and participate in that world. So I think creatives and creators, we do have this weird mix going on where everybody is so focused on the network building side of things that the craft suffers a little bit.